Hello and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, and welcome to a brand new Modelling for Beginners series. This is even more modelling for beginners, and as I hope you can tell or already know, we're going to use this 1/48 bolt and pull Defiant kit this time. So this is the introduction to the series. I'm going to offer information during this video showing what I'm going to use throughout the build, and it's primarily aimed at people who want to follow along, but also just background information on the build. So this kit is currently not in production by Airfix, so if you do want to join in, you'll have to try and find one second hand, as I in fact did. This kit was purchased second hand from modelsforsale.com, and they are out there and the prices aren't too ridiculous. But fear not, dear modelers, because if you do wish to build along but can't find a second hand kit, then just have some patience and wait a few months, because Airfix are in fact re-releasing this kit this year, although I believe it's not due out until the latter part of the year. Let me just check, because I did ask the other day. Yeah, expected in the autumn. So this series will remain obviously on YouTube, so if you can't get hold of one, then pick one up when it's reissued and just follow along retrospectively at that point. So even more modelling for beginners then. This is the third of a series which I have decided will be three that I've filmed in this way. The first series was the Mosquito PR16, which was a very basic build and a fairly basic paint scheme. No real additions or extras on that, just pretty much straight from the box, no messing. The second series, more modelling for beginners, used the 1/48 scale P51D, and that introduced a few bits of aftermarket and a bit more complication in the paint scheme and some weathering. Now granted, some of that aftermarket turned out to be more work than it perhaps should have been, but the idea was just to elevate the complexity just a little bit from the first series. This is going to be the third, and as I say, it's going to be a series of three, so this is going to be the last Modelling for Beginners series, and I'm elevating the difficulty level a little bit more again. So this time we're going to utilise proper photo etch rather than the 3D printed decals. Some turned brass parts and some pure resin wheels, which I say pure, I mean they're proper cast resin rather than 3D printed. I'm also going to include a little bit more in terms of how to create finesse yourself as opposed to adding aftermarket. I'm probably going to rivet the airframe, and there'll be a bit more on weathering as well, so we're bringing that complexity level up a little bit more. So the point being, and the reason I'm telling you this, is because in both of the previous series I have received comments and general remarks to the tune of "this is not for beginners," even on the Mosquito build. And arguably, if we're using photo etch and what have you, this isn't for beginners, but the point of the series is that I will be showing all of the processes in detail, hopefully with a view for a beginner, i.e. someone who isn't used to using this stuff, potentially isn't experienced with it, and trying to come at it with all the information that someone who isn't used to it might need. I probably fall short here and there because you forget what you know, as it were, but I do try. So to ward off those comments from the get-go, it's the third of a series of three. We've upped the complexity. It is still going to be aimed at people who are less experienced with modelling to the level that this model will hopefully come out at. So as I say, there'll be photo etch, there'll be resin, there'll be turned brass, there'll be airframe modifications, and then there'll be weathering as well. Anyway, this is the kit I've got. This is the aircraft I'm going to represent, and there will be a separate video coming along with a lot more about that. Now for extras, what have we got? Obviously the kit's in here. It is out of the bags, but I'm sure you can tell I have not done anything towards starting it at this point. It is completely fresh. I just had a nice look at it when I did the review, and I didn't bother putting it back in the bags because I knew I'd be building it reasonably soon. And actually, that reasonably soon has ended up being much longer than I expected it to be. Okay, so extras. What it comes down to is this. So what I have here is an Edward photo etch set. This is the zoom set. So this is a simpler set. It's just aimed at effectively just dressing up the cockpit a little bit with maybe a few odds and sods for the exterior. And that's what you get with that. It's not the latest kind with the pre-glossed dials, but it is, as you can clearly see, the pre-painted flavour. The model number, the set number for this particular set is FE753. I got this from Hannants and it cost £11.99 for this one. And here I have master barrels. These are gun barrels and a pitot tube for the aircraft, as you can see. AM 48-167. And I think master brass pitots were available are pretty much a done deal as far as I'm concerned. They're absolutely brilliant and they're always a massive improvement over the kit parts. They're stronger and the finesse is much greater. This one has the added bonus of having machined barrels for the turret as well, which have again far greater finesse and detail than the kit parts, and this set is £11.50, so relatively pricey I suppose, but really does make a big difference to the look of the thing when done. And lastly I picked up some wheels. It's a wheel set, and this time we've got Barracuda cast. These parts are from Roy Sutherland over in the States, and I've always found Barracuda cast parts to be of the highest quality, both in terms of the detail and actually in use, and hopefully these kits will live up to that. And Barracuda cast wheels are £7.99, so they're comparable with other aftermarket wheel manufacturers. And moving on from the kit and the aftermarket parts I'm going to be using, I have been loaned this booklet from the lovely Andy Long. Thank you very much to him. He has given me a lot of information on the aircraft I'm going to be modelling. As I said, some photos, some general information, and then he's loaned me this book as well. And look at this aircraft right on the cover, the weathering. It's fab, isn't it? This is a technical guide from Airframe, from Valiant Publishing, Airframe Detail number 5. And it traces a brief history of the type. It's interesting how much it looks like a Hurricane without a turret on there, isn't it? Well, at first glance anyway. Brief history of the type. Here we go. Lots and lots of photographs. More weathering. Then we get technical descriptions, so there's a lot of drawings and such, sort of period. These are period images from the pilot manuals and things like that. It's all good stuff. And then photographs, detailed photographs of the real thing. So, real Defiants that are left. There is only one surviving complete example of a Defiant, which is currently at the Royal Air Force Museum in Cosford, and I am going to visit that aircraft next week, in fact, to do some research on something, and there will be a separate video covering all of that, which I hope will be of interest to some people. It's certainly something that tickles my fancy. The research and looking at a real aircraft to figure things out is something that really interests me. So as you can see, it's a treasure trove, this booklet, isn't it? These are good photos, and this aircraft was carefully restored. So it may not be completely correct, period correct, but it's not going to be far from it. We've even got cowlings off so we can see the engine here. There's lots and lots of technical data. Photographs, as you can see, many pages. There's not going to be too much guesswork involved utilising this book, so I'm very thankful that Andy decided to let me use it for this project. It's going to be very useful. And right at the back then we've got some camouflage and marking stuff if you're not sure on markings and what you might want to do with your kit. This is a nice one that you can't see, this one. All sorts of options here. I think truthfully you're fairly limited. The standard day fighter camo with or without the two-tone undersides of the early war period, so that's dark earth and dark green. I think I'm right in saying there were some, don't seem to be shown here. Here they are, yes. Temperate Sea Scheme for Air Sea Rescue aircraft, and of course the all black night fighters. And here's our aircraft here, N3328 151 Squadron. Again, all photos. There is our aircraft again. Target tug versions. Marking placement drawings. And then finally, scale plans, hopefully, with rivets. And these are in 48 scale. And this is how I'll map out the riveting on the model. I am not going to be doing what some modelers do, just randomly applying rivet marks all over the thing. I'm going to replicate the original, and here we have everything needed to do that. So personally I think this book is an absolute treasure trove if we're going to be building this kit. And then right at the back there's actually a build by Steve Evans, who is an excellent modeller of the very kit that we're going to be working on. So this is definitely worth picking up, although obviously I'll share what's needed as I go along. So there we go, that covers it. If you wish to build along in exactly the same vein as I'm going to do it, this is the aftermarket you need. Please don't feel that you have to use the aftermarket. If you want to just build along without it, that's absolutely fine as well. The main barrier to entrance really is going to be getting hold of a kit, and that's why I'm putting this intro video up now. It will give you about a month's heads up to go out and find yourself a kit. If you've already got one, that's great. You're just going to have to sit and wait for another month or so before we start. If not, you've got about that long to go and find the kit and the aftermarket parts if you want them, and indeed a copy of the reference work. As I alluded to earlier, there will be a separate video coming where I'm going to do some detective work based on this aircraft, and I'm going to use the example housed at the Royal Air Force Museum in Cosford to try to carry that out. I'm not guaranteed success, but I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to try and do a nice video all about that as well, and I'll put that up as soon as it's ready. So that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to having you all along on the build when I start it. And with all of that said, I think it only remains for me to say, until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.